Welcome to the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy, such as the Deferred Sales Trust, is the best way for you to exit your highly appreciated asset. I'm your host, Brett Swarts. Each episode, I am joined by some of the best real estate, financial, wealth, and business minds in the world, where they share their ideas, deal stories, and inspiration. So together we can make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. I'm excited about our next guest. This is going to be a fun episode because there's three of us today, folks. These two gentlemen have a passion for helping people create and preserve more wealth. They are consultants and hosts of the Infinite Wealth podcast, and they're also the founder of Infinite Wealth Consultants. They're they're out of Las Vegas. And they have, at least one of them has served in the U.S. Army and is a self-described and recovering CPA. And the other, he's going to tell us a little bit more because I can't quite see it on this bio sheet. So please welcome to the show with me, Anthony Faso and Cameron Christensen. How are you guys doing?
We are doing great and excited to be on your podcast. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Brett.
A pleasure. Let's start with Anthony, the recovering CPA, Faso. And by the way, you can find these fine gentlemen at infinitewealthconsultants.com. That's infinitewealthconsultants.com. Anthony, give us a little bit about your story and your current focus.
Okay. Well, I like to say that I'm a recovering CPA. I've been a CPA for over 20 years. I worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers, CFO for a chain of restaurants, and then I eventually opened up my own firm. But what I found was the advice that typical financial planning was given, and even me as a CPA was given, was just not working. And I came to that realization, particularly in 2008, where I remember that I had one client. He goes, Anthony, I did everything right. I paid off my house. I stayed out of debt. I maxed out my 401k. And then now all the equity in my house is gone. My 401k is now a 201k. And now I'm 70 years old. And now you're telling me I need to go back to work when unemployment is in double digits. And then I kind of that really hit home to me. For one, he was literally in tears standing across my desk. But then eventually I came into tears because I realized that I was on the same path that he was. I started doing some research, and there's a quote unquote crash or correction about every 10 years. There was in 08, there was 2000, the 90s, 80s. I mean, what's unreal is we haven't had one yet, which I think we're on the cusp. But what that did is that challenged me to find something different. And so what I noticed, some of my clients did really well in 08 and 09. So I started asking them, well, what are you doing? Like, what's your mindset? How are you thinking differently? And also, what books are you reading? And so I started following and practicing the same concepts that they were doing. And the two major books that they told me was Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and then also Becoming Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash. And so I started to incorporate both of those books for me personally. But then my clients kept on saying, well, Anthony, what should I do? I don't fully trust Wall Street, and I want some guidance. So I started sharing what I was doing. And then eventually I had, a financial advising practice and a CPA firm. And I realized that I didn't want to be a jack of all trades, master of none. I wanted to be an expert in one area. So I sold my firm probably about 6 or 7 years ago, and have been doing this full-time ever since.
Fantastic. Love that. We'll dive into some of that stuff here in a minute. Now it's Cameron Christensen. You're up. Go, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. As my story is, I moved here to Las Vegas maybe 16, 17 years ago. And what I did is I immediately started a small business, and I had that for, 6 or 7 years. And similar to Anthony, in that is I was a small business owner, and I did not have an HR department. So I couldn't turn to someone to kind of say, hey, this is what we're going to do as far as financial kind of avenues. And so I started looking at my options. And to be honest, I was really, really frustrated with the options that were available for me as a small business owner. All the options that I was presented with were essentially me putting my money somewhere where I was not going to have access to it. And so what I did is I actually just sat on cash for many years and kind of kept doing research. And you finally get to a point where you're just so overwhelmed with the amount of information out there that you just don't do anything. And so I did that for several years, just sat on cash and was frustrated. And to be honest, my story is my wife and I were buying a house, and I walked into this broker's office, and we're sitting down with him, and I asked him, and I said, "Do you have a good book for a young couple?" And he turned around and he handed me Nelson Nash's book. And he goes, "If I would have read this at your age, it would have been the difference of millions of dollars." And so I went home. I read that book 3 times the first night. And Brett, man, if I'm honest, I was really upset. On page 45 in that book, it teaches you about collateralizing. And it shows you that paying cash for any major purchase is not the best option. And so there I was, kind of mid-20s, pretty successful, had great income, and thought I knew everything. And this book started just tearing apart everything that I knew about personal finances. And really, I felt like I was starting over at that point. And so the strategies that I found in that book were really designed for me as a business owner. And what I did is similar to Anthony, I just started sharing with other business owners that I knew. And then people started asking for advice. And what you find kind of in this space is that once you learn some of these strategies, you almost feel an obligation to share it with others that are in a similar situation. And so I became kind of an advisor. I got in this industry about 10, 11 years ago now, and met this guy about 8 years ago. And then we partnered up just a couple years ago. And so here we are now. Fast forward, we got Infinite Wealth Consultants.
Amazing. Love it, guys. So let's dive right in. What in the world is infinite banking for those who are learning about it for the first time? And then the second part of that would be for those that are ultra wealthy, what are they doing to take advantage of infinite banking?
Great question.
Okay, great. Okay, cool. All right. Now with infinite banking, one of the tenets that infinite banking really is started from the book called Becoming Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash. And there's other people are put their own spin on the word. So maybe it's becoming be your own bank, or cash flow banking, or there's some other terminology, but it all started from Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker. And one of the key things he talked about was you finance everything you buy. Meaning, if you pay cash, then we give up interest that we could have earned with that money. But then if we use credit, we pay interest. So he'd say we either give up or pay up, right? And so what he talks about in the book, and we're kind of just going to give a high level example, but what he talks about is creating your own banking system with a high cash value life insurance policy. Now, this policy is, I like to say, is not your mama's whole life policy. It's designed very different, minimize death benefit and maximize the cash. And what it is, we can leverage that cash, kind of like what Cameron had mentioned. Instead of us spending it, we borrow against it, right? And it may sound complicated at first, but it's just like using a rewards credit card. Right now, let me ask you: do you use a rewards credit card?
I do. I have my American Express. We're traveling to Florida. We're traveling to France this year. We're getting all our points to get some free flights.
There you go.
Exactly. So why use that credit card as opposed to just paying cash?
Because they're giving you free flights.
Exactly. You're going to buy it anyways, but you add one extra step, your credit card, you get a bonus in the form of miles. If you can understand that, you can understand infinite banking. Okay.
Perfect.
Let's
break it down.
Okay. So let's say you wanted to buy some real estate. What we can do is, we use our policy first to maybe to do the down payment, or to pay for it in full. And then by doing that, instead of getting miles, we're getting more money. And the reason being is because, just like what Nelson had talked about, if we pay cash, we break that compound interest curve, right? We drain our account and buy the asset, and then we save up money to buy another asset, and then we drain our account. The problem is we're continually breaking the compound interest curve. But by structuring and leveraging an infinite banking policy, we never break that compound interest curve. Because when we go to borrow against the policy, we're not taking it from the policy, we're borrowing against it. Insurance company is using it as collateral, and you're actually using the insurance company's money. So the advantage is your money is still there, still compounding, even though you're using it. So that's where you get that extra, aka miles, you're getting more money.
Brett, if you don't mind, I'll jump in there and add a little something to what he just said. Is there a lot of times what we'll do with clients, especially if somebody's new, like you had kind of proposed to us, is we'll break it down into two different categories. What we call it is we'll say 20% of what we're doing is going to be the product, and that's going to be the whole life insurance policy. What's really important about the product is that you got to get a properly designed policy. And so properly designed, it needs to have certain features, right? We want to have those loan provisions that Anthony just talked about. But number one, by putting our money inside a properly designed policy is we've got access to it. We've got collateralization. We've got credit protection. So the number one concern with most real estate investors is that they're usually sitting on some cash, kind of waiting for the next deal. And so what we're doing is we're just repositioning that cash to kind of have a wrapper around it inside of that policy. And also one of the biggest features is that we also get a really good earnings rate on that cash value. And so those are kind of the features around the 20%, which is going to be the product. What's even more important is what you do with the money. And what I tell people all the time is that we can create some wealth for you, but to be wealthy is you've got to put this money to work for you. And that is going to be the process of infinite banking. And that's going to create probably 80% of the returns for you. And so your example was using real estate, where you would fund a policy, and then you take a loan against your cash value, and then you go buy some sort of real estate investment. We've got a lot of clients that use turnkey or apartment syndications, but anything that creates cash flow, and that cash flow is going to come back to replenish or repay that loan against your policy. We've got many, many examples of clients that will buy cars or will do college tuition or those things. And so the process is really what I would say kind of separates Anthony and I from most people that are in this space. Is the policy is important, but it's not as important as what you go do with that. And so that's where we spend most of our conversations with clients is, hey, what opportunities can we find to go create cash flow, creating that cash value? Yep.
Got it. So let me make sure if I'm getting this with our listeners here. So you're using you're leveraging the collateral, which is the policy, and you're using that amount to go for whatever, buy a property, buy whatever. So is that a fair summary so far?
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool.
Okay. So now let's make an example. So I got $1 million and I can put this $1 million as a down payment right now for a multifamily property, 3.25%. I have a listing right now and it's like $2.6 million, and the bank is saying they'll loan about $1.5 million. So I could just put the $1 million to the bank and borrow at 3.25 and buy that property for $2.6 million. But correct me if I'm wrong. Are you saying it might be more beneficial to put that $1 million into a infinite banking life insurance that's designed with collateralization, access, loan features, whole life insurance policy product, and then from there put it as the down payment? Walk me through that.
Yeah. You basically nailed it, right? We just, that down payment's got to come from somewhere. It can come from cash or it can come from the policy. And the advantage of it coming from the policy, again, as I alluded to, we never break the compound interest curve. Okay. Now, so that means that policy is continuing to grow. It's continuing to compound because we never took it from the policy. We're actually using the insurance company's money. And here's another piece. Since we're using their money, they're going to continue to pay us interest and dividends, but we're going to have to pay them interest. And where a lot of people get stuck is like, wait a minute, I just put this $1 million in and now I take it out. I have to pay interest. But the thing is, you're still compounding on your money. So there is a difference between the power of compounding and then a simple interest loan. And we have done the math, and we have a video that crunches it. We love to do the math, especially me. But here's another, not only does that work just like that, but however, we can actually create tax deductions.
So let's
Right?
pause there, though. I want to do the math first, guys, because
Yeah.
I don't want the tax deduction until I do the math.
Okay.
So let's say I put the $1 million in this policy. What's it going to cost to set up the policy? So is my million now 950,000? Is it 985? Is it 900,000? Give me the cost just to get that million accessible for the down payment. Walk me through that.
Okay. Now there's a lot of different ways to design it, but we do, a lot of times we have some people that have a windfall or a lump sum. Okay, let's just say they have this $1 million. Well, we can design a policy where all they put in is that $1 million. Okay, now
exactly. So that's the one I want. This is a wealthy person.
Okay,
they've got $5 to $10 million bucks, right? They don't need or want the cash necessarily right now. They can put it in the apartment complex, just get the loan at 3.25, or B, they can put it into the policy at $1 million and then borrow from the policy to put it into that property as a down payment. So I just want to just keep it real simple there. So what would it cost them to do that?
Okay, it's gonna be a little variance, depending on the age of the person. But for example,
healthy, they're 50 years old, they're married.
Okay.
No, so their life expectancy is 85, 90. They're doing great.
Okay. We just did a similar case on that, and at the end of year one, they had 99% of what they put in.
Okay, so in 1 year, they're at 99%. So they're at $999,000.
Correct.
Okay, but in this scenario, they want to put it there, and then they want to go buy a property as a down payment. So in that scenario, what is it costing to borrow from the policy, and where would it be at the end of 1 year?
Okay, what we would be able to do is we could borrow 100 up to 100% of that value. Okay,
of that value of the 999,000 of the million, or because there's got to be fees, right, when we close. So am I dropping and then 100% of that new value, and then it's building back up? Walk me through that.
I would say if, say from day the number I was using, 99, that was at the end of year one, right? So there is some growth for those 12 months. Right. So I would say that there's probably maybe a 4% down, maybe from say 30 days later.
Okay, so I put $1 million in, and it cost me about 4%, give or take. And so then the closing cost, I'll call that the closing cost right now. And then I'm going to take in that scenario $960,000, right? Is that right? Am I doing the math right there?
Yeah.
And I'm going to put that. I'm going to come up with another $40,000. Am I doing that right? No, 4% of $1 million would be more than that, right? Let me see. Let me do the math, guys. Make sure I got it.
I'm a recovering CPA, so I don't do math anymore.
4%. It's 40 grand. I was right. So I got $1 million minus the 40. So now I'm at 960. Okay. So I've got 960 the next day, and now I've got to come out of pocket personally for 40. So we'll do the ROI on that. Am I following it so far?
Yes.
What am I borrowing that 960 at? What's the interest rate on that?
Currently, right now, we can get it at 3%.
Okay. So I'm borrowing at 3. Okay, I'm making up perhaps a 0.25% there because, not necessarily, because will a property will a bank care where that 960 come from? In other words, it's just going to my account, personal money, and it's seen as that, or is a bank going to scrutinize that 960 and say, oh, it's coming from this insurance policy? Is it going to hurt me?
Well, no, it shouldn't, because we have clients do this all the time, and we can explain it to the underwriter exactly how the money's is getting there.
And Brett, I'll jump in. I'll jump in there. From the bank's perspective, is actually put more value on money that is collateralized inside a whole life insurance policy for several reasons. Number one is when you look at the stability of insurance companies is, man, they sit on cash. They know that if money is sitting with an insurance company, that their amount of risk is almost nil, right? It's zero. And so in addition to that, because we have it inside of a whole life insurance policy, there's going to be a death benefit, which is something that we don't often talk about because we're more focused on cash value and what you can do with it. But there will be a death benefit there. And the banks appreciate that because they recognize that fact that, hey, not only do we have cash if this guy lives, but also if this individual that we're lending this money to, he dies, we're still going to get paid back. And so banks actually put more value on money that is collateralized inside a whole life insurance policy than they ever would with cash.
Yeah, they're diversifying the chances of getting paid back, right? They're saying,
absolutely.
Saying, A, it's a big insurance company that's going to be, perhaps conservative, have a good track record with investments, and then B, if they die, right, then it's tax free, right? We're going to get paid. Is that a fair summary, guys?
Fair summary, great.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so let's keep diving here. Okay, so I borrow at 3% or so. So now I've got the 960. Now I take another 60 personal to make because I needed $1 million for the down payment. So I'm feeling okay there, and I'm going to borrow at 3.25 for the other 1.5 million to buy the property. So now I bought the property. So now a year goes by. Right, essentially I'm borrowing, $2.5 million is one way to look at it, right? With about $1 million at about 3%, 960 about 3%, and then the remainder about a 3.25. Okay, and now let's talk about the arbitrage. So you mentioned now investments. So what happened to my 960? What has been the average rate of return? How and where are those funds invested?
Okay, glad you asked, because earlier you asked a question about how would this benefit high net worth clients? Okay, so here are a few things. For one, each state's different, as you know, but each state has some level of asset protection of the cash value inside your policy. So there is that asset protection of the cash value. Also, when we are borrowing, so your question was the average rate of return, and it's about averaging 4%. Okay, but here's another thing. That's 4% is after that's a bottom line number. So that's after any expenses. That's after any taxes. So a high income individual, they may need to earn 7%. To maybe pay, or maybe 8% to pay their advisor the 1%, but then also pay the IRS. And if they live in the great state of California, they will be paying some more tax as well. So they may need to earn 7 to 8%, pay taxes and fees to equal the 4%.
So pause there, make sure I captured that. Okay, so what you're saying is, it's on average, it's going to return about 4% net of fees and net of taxes. Imagine I didn't take that 960 out, and I simply had it in there. Am I able to cash flow that 4% tax free? Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm. You could.
Okay, so let's say I put $1 million in there. I said I just want to put it in there, and it's producing 4%. Whatever it produces, you're saying it's tax free to me. I don't pay income tax on that.
Correct.
And I don't, and that's, is that right? Am I missing that?
Right.
Or no?
You're right.
Okay. But am I borrowing from myself, or am I living off the interest that it's earning?
You want to take that one?
Yeah, I was going to say, great question. So you're diving down into kind of what that looks like. We've got kind of 4% that policy is earning. So you've got a couple options, right? You can borrow against, right, loans, just like a home equity line of credit. If you borrow against that, it's not taxable. And it's the same situation with cash values. If you borrow against that policy, it's a non-taxable event. And so you can make it so that it does become taxable, right? But the whole idea of this strategy, same thing, right? With a deferred sales trust, is what we're trying to avoid is taxes. And so we're going to try to put every strategy first that is either tax deferral or tax avoidance, tax-free. And so we're going to put everything, we're going to start with that. I want to touch on something that you just mentioned is, if we have $1 million inside a life insurance policy that we're borrowing against, and you talked about kind of withdrawing money off of that, there's a kind of a fundamental understanding I want to make sure your listeners understand is this is what Anthony and I spend so much time on, kind of that 80% in creating cash flow, is ideally for me, my goal is if I have $1 million of cash value in a policy, is I don't want to be drawing off of that $1 million. I'm leveraging that $1 million to create cash flow for me to live off of. And so those assets are creating the income to support my lifestyle. I don't want to ever draw down to zero my $1 million. So there's a big difference between kind of someone's understanding is the cash value is the tool that we use for leverage to go create cash value. We don't really want to deplete that or draw that down.
Okay, term of the loan, guys. So is this like a 5-year term of a loan? Is there no term on the loan? When do I have to pay this $960 back? So going back to, I just took the money out and I borrowed my policy against my policy at 3%. I'm making a 1% arbitrage, which I'm making 4%, right? So I'm making a little bit there. But what's the term? When do I need to pay it back?
So the terms are dictated by the policy owner. Right. If we have a loan against our cash value, the insurance company is going to keep record of that loan and they'll send us a statement every single year on that. But as far as how we pay that thing back, when we pay it off, how long we have it outstanding is completely dependent upon the policy owner. What I'll typically recommend to clients is you let that asset that you purchased dictate that loan repayment. So we work with a lot of guys that do, fix and flips. And usually, they have money outstanding for 3 to 6 months. Let's call it 4. And so we'll borrow that money out. We're going to do one of two things. One, we either make no loan payments at all, principal or interest, or we make interest-only payments until we sell that property, and then we take all the profits and we put it back inside that policy. If we're doing a rental, right, we go buy a rental, we get monthly income that comes back immediately. We'll start those monthly repayments going back to the policy to replenish those. So you got your options.
You want to structure it based upon the cycle of the life cycle of the deal. There could be prepayment penalties. It could be principal and interest. It could be a balloon payment. It's flexible, but you just kind of want to just structure it based upon each deal. Is that a fair summary?
Correct. And it's almost like it's very similar to a line of credit, like a HELOC, right? Where the interest only is due. There is no structured terms. What we recommend, highly encourage, is that we want to pay at least the interest. And we want to do that for 2 reasons. For one, technically, we don't have to pay the interest. You can have that added onto the loan. However, we don't want the interest to accrue. So ideally, we'd want to pay at least the interest. And then probably another big reason to pay the interest is if you like in this example, we're buying an apartment complex and the mortgage that we're getting from the bank. Now that interest is tax deductible, right? And if we use one of these, your policy loan for an investment purpose, that also becomes tax deductible. So you start doing the math. Let's do simple math. So since you are in California, let's just say the tax rate with state and everything is 50%. Okay. So that 3% is really costing you 1.5 after your tax deduction. Does that sound fair?
Sure.
Okay. But remember that 4% is after taxes. So talk about arbitrage. There's even a bigger value because your money is compounding at around 4, and the net cost of your money is about 1.5 to 2, depending on your tax bracket.
Got it. So it'd be like making 5.5 compounding. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. All right. It's good.
That sounds pretty good to me.
I appreciate you guys getting the weeds with me here, right? Because this is not easy, right? And it's hard. We're on a podcast too. It's better if you see graphs and figures and numbers and have real live deals, but you guys are good sports here to go through that. So I want you to encourage you guys to go to infinitewealthconsultants.com if you want to learn more about infinite banking. That's infinitewealthconsultants.com. We're here with Anthony Faso, CPA, and Cameron Christensen. So let's shift, guys. We did I think we did a pretty deep dive there, and people's heads are probably a little bit spinning, but I think I followed it pretty good, and I think you guys laid it out really well. I want to talk about asset protection. I think we mentioned that. So briefly touch on just the payoff here for somebody who, again, bought that apartment complex, borrowed from the policy, asset protection. Why do it, guys? Why not just put the $1 million down? What is asset protection going to give me here?
Well, again, each state's different, and unfortunately, California is probably one of the least protection state, which I'm sure is no surprise to you. But in a lot of states like Nevada, where we're at, Texas, Florida, a lot of states, whatever money you have in cash value is protected from lawsuits and creditors. So like when we were talking about why the advantages to the wealthy is they can put the money in a policy and it's protected from creditors. It's growing at a decent rate of return. It's tax-free, and it's also liquid. Because here's the key, like you're using this example with real estate. What we're trying to tell people is that this is an and asset. We're not saying put your money in life insurance or real estate or your business or the market. This is an and. Let's put the money in the policy and real estate and the business. Okay. So we just want to entice what you're doing. A lot of your clients are doing very well with their investments. And last thing we want to do is disturb that. But by running things through the policy, just like a rewards credit card, what they're going to get is that uninterrupted compound interest. And we're actually creating some tax deductions.
Okay. So I own the property literally with the down payment that came from the trust. I borrowed against it. Is there an asset protection part of this that I'm more protected now than I was if I just bought the property with my own cash?
Yeah, there is. So here's a scenario. So if you go and you fund a policy, you take a loan against it for around $1 million and you go and purchase that. What you've created when you take a loan against your cash values is essentially created a lien against that cash value with the insurance company. So if there's ever an exit or anything else from your property, but there happens to be a lawsuit against you prior to you exiting that, there was a lien established back when you took a loan against that cash value, right? So when you sell that property, you can then replenish that loan with the insurance company. So essentially what you're doing is you're creating kind of a bucket that you can put $1 million back into, even if things go sideways, there's a lawsuit, there's a judgment, something like that, right? So, and that's not uncommon. It's just a characteristics that's found in this strategy, but it's found in many others. You see that with pensions and those things with celebrities. You hear about that stuff all the time.
Got it. Perfect, guys. No, that's great. You guys did a great job explaining that. Again, infinitewealthconsultants.com, Anthony Faso and Cameron Christensen, they're out of Las Vegas, and they can help you with infinite banking. So let's shift a little bit here. So I'm going to talk about capital gains tax deferral a little bit. So one of the things we're trying to help people is have solutions for capital gains tax deferral. So I'm curious, guys, what's the biggest frustration when it comes to capital gains tax deferral options? You could talk about the 1031. You could talk about other things, but what's the biggest frustration you guys see for yourself or your clients?
I think without using some of the strategies you're incorporating, the biggest one is paying the tax, right? Right? Even though I will say capital gains are fairly low right now, but
well, who wants to? What do you mean by low? California is 13.3. We got a Medicare tax of about 3.8. We got federal at 20, and that's about 37%, not counting depreciation recapture, which could be as upwards of 40 or 45 or 50. So can you define low for us?
Well, I would say that there's different tax rates, ordinary and capital gains, and capital gains is always going to be lower than your ordinary income. So I'm referring to ordinary income versus capital gains. But
okay, fair enough.
Nobody wants to pay the tax, especially they've probably put their blood, sweat, and tears in this business, or they risk making this investment, and then to have to pay some of these profits to the government is by far the biggest pain. And the 1031 has some advantages, but all we're doing is kicking the can down the road, right? We're just deferring them. So kind of, I like with what you're doing is you're helping get rid of them, which would be much better than paying them, I would say.
What's your biggest frustration with the 1031 exchange?
For me, I'm hesitant to defer taxes to a rate that I don't know what it's going to be. I mean, there's been a lot of talk with the capital gains rate being increased, particularly over people. I just read in the paper today, Biden's floating around the idea if people make more than $1 million, that I don't know if that they're going to have a higher capital gains rate. I don't know exactly what he's trying to do, but he's trying to get rid of some of the advantage of the capital gains rate. So if that passes and you defer it to 1031 to a couple of years from now, you could actually be paying more tax.
Yeah,
what I would
you
say,
finally take some boot or you finally cash out. Go ahead, Cameron.
no, I was just going to try to take kind of a big, broad picture at this. Is nobody likes paying taxes, right? So really, there's 4 or 5 different ways that you can kind of what you would call tax avoidance, whether it's deferral, it's deductions, it's elimination, it's kind of offsetting some of the stuff to different tax brackets, right? And so the space that we play in, Anthony and I play in, is the permanent tax savings, right? And so a lot of times if you have a big sale of a highly appreciated asset, you look at a charitable remainder trust or you look at a deferred sales trust that you recommend are very well versed in, right? If you have a highly appreciated asset, maybe that makes sense. What we typically do is we want to get somebody over into the permanent tax savings as quickly as possible. And now what you see is with a lot of deferral strategies is people don't have access to those dollars. And so the strategy that we implement is a permanent tax savings where we provide access to those dollars for clients. And what's different, you kind of mentioned it before, you start off by asking kind of, hey, why is this important to wealthy clients? It's important up and down the spectrum, right? Man, you know what? You rewind, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I was early 20s. I wouldn't say that I was wealthy, but I had some of the same frustrations. My frustrations were nobody taught me about money or how to create wealth. And so by putting money somewhere where somebody has access to it, is now we can kind of talk to people about how money works. And that's probably one of the biggest frustrations that I see with our higher end wealthy clients is that lack of communication on how that patriarch or that matriarch created the wealth over their lifetime. Is what you see one generation that has been really successful either in business and or real estate, and the next generation doesn't have a clue on how they did it, doesn't have a clue on how to manage money. And so that's where we have really kind of set ourselves apart, is having those family conversations. And a lot of what we do is probably what I would say falls under more estate planning than really anything else, is when you have those conversations, that generational wealth planning, it is all about preservation. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely does. And just so you guys know, the Deferred Sales Trust, for our listeners, what I love about it is it provides liquidity, diversification, and the ability to be active or passive. And I like to separate wealth strategies or tax deferral strategies into kind of 2 buckets. There's like the transactional ones. I call those like the blockbusters. Those are like the Delaware Statutory Trust. Those are like the charitable remainder trust. Those are like the 1031 exchange. They're typically pretty limited and pretty focused. They all serve their purpose in different ways, but it doesn't necessarily always give you liquidity, diversification, and the ability to be active or passive without having to give it all away to charity. With the Deferred Sales Trust, why I think it's transformational, is it kind of gives, we call it the Swiss Army knife of tax deferral strategies. You can have liquidity, you can have diversification, you can be active in real estate, you can be passive in real estate, you could be in stocks, bonds, mutual funds, you can go into hard money lending. I have a client right now, we did a $2.6 million sale out of Alabama, and he deferred all of his tax, and he's building 72 units. He's in his early 40s, and he's like, I don't want to retire all the way. I also have a really high income, and I want to shift to the second phase of my career, which is multifamily development. So he went from like a marketing business background, and now he's launched his new business. I call it the Go Fund Yourself. He used the Deferred Sales Trust, partnered with it, all tax deferred, to build these units. And on top of that, he's a very high income earner. So he's able to, like a 401k, roll the funds on the cash flow back into the trust, and at the trust level, it's able to expense what it owes to him. Therefore, it's typically a zero tax transaction when it's filing his tax return. On his level, he's lowered his tax bracket because he's not necessarily taking cash flow from the trust. So all of these things are possible. The question is, are you the listener going to get educated and check it out, right? Are you going to get with me, Capital Gains Tax Solutions, or Anthony or Cameron, and figure out at Infinite for the Infinite Banking Strategy to figure out if it's a good fit for you. I encourage you to do that. All that being said, guys, we're running out of time. Are you ready for the lightning round?
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
Fire away.
All right.
First one.
So knowing what you know now, if you go back to your 25-year-old self, what's the one golden nugget you would tell yourself to do?
Make sure you understand the difference between words. Words are important. I would say make sure you understand the difference between saving, investing, and speculating. In our industry, those three words are interchanged every single day, and they are drastically different. And so that's where I would start with the young 20-year-old.
For me, I would focus on getting educated. And I don't mean taking college courses, but I mean working with a mentor, learning about business, learning about passive income, not focusing on the money I'm making, but the sense or common sense that I am earning, and that will pay much bigger dividends in the future than any paycheck in my 20s.
Beautiful. Second question, what's the number one book you recommended the most or gifted in the past year?
I'm going to recommend Become Your Own Banker. It wasn't in the last year, but I'm going to stretch that timeline a little bit, go back 12 years. And I'll tell you what, that's the second most influential book that I've ever read, second to the Bible. And I think I've tried to read it every single month since then.
What I've been recommending this year is called the 12-week year. And it's a whole different philosophy. Instead of doing annualized goal setting, you kind of basically crunch a year down into 12 weeks. And the reason being, a year is too long. You might hit a goal or miss a goal in the first quarter, and maybe you're not going to be as efficient. But as you know, when you have that deadline, that's when you're going to become the most efficient. And that 12-week year helps you focus on the important things.
Beautiful. Become Your Own Banker, 12-week year. Question 3, what are you curious about right now?
I'm curious what this economy is going to look like in the next 12 months. Right, as I'm putting myself in a cash position to look for distressed opportunities, and so I'm curious to where we're gonna go.
I'm curious how long the government is going to continue to prop up the economy.
As am I, guys. This is very interesting to see. Question 4, what's the biggest obstacle your business is currently facing?
Biggest obstacle that we are currently facing is education, right? Is clients need to hear a message, right? People need to hear a message, if I'm totally honest, is because underlying what people do is they have this gut feeling that everything's not right? Everybody's going to work, they're putting money in their 401ks, their IRAs, and the vast majority of people are subject to market volatility, and they just don't know of any other options. And if you go in there and you look at how kind of typical qualified plans, the history of them and where they came about, they weren't designed to be somebody's sole retirement vehicle, as an accessory to a high executive's kind of bonus at the end of the year. And now it's kind of moved over into position A. What we're doing is we're giving people options with more control and less risk.
I'm going to expand on that with more of a personal obstacle that we are having. When COVID first hit, Cameron and I were a little unsure how that was going to affect our business, to be honest. But we actually had our best year last year. And I think it's being when there's uncertain times, people are looking for certainty. So we're balancing we're getting clients coming in, but we also want to produce more content. So kind of like what a lot of business owners will have is that transition, of still being able to provide the good service, but want to go out there and create more content. It's kind of hard to delegate some of that stuff, so that's probably the biggest obstacle.
I love it, guys. You guys have been amazing. We are out of time. For our listeners who want to get in touch with you guys, will you remind them one more time, what's the best place for them to connect with you?
Actually, I'm going to give you two places, infinitewealthconsultants.com. And then Brett, like I mentioned before, is we actually created, because as a thank you for having us on here, we're going to give your listeners access to our free online course. And so we've created a page for you guys. It's called infinitewealthconsultants.com/CRE secrets. And so if you guys go in there, we're going to open up kind of our course to you guys so you can dive in. We've got a whole bunch of information. We dive into the numbers like Brett was asking us about. And so there's more of that in there. with some more conceptual stuff just to educate you guys.
You know, I would like to correct Cameron. For one, that's one of my joys in life is correcting Cameron. It's not a free course. We actually charge $600 for it.
That's true.
But if you use this link because you're a listener and as a thank you, you can get free access.
And by the way, if you guys are wondering what CRE Secrets is, so that's my second podcast. We're also streaming expert CRE secrets for our YouTube and our second podcast right now as well. Some guests, we do dual shows here. Okay, so if you're listening on one or the other, sometimes it's the same because it is exactly launching at the same time. That being said, guys, I want to thank you for being on the show. Thank you for sharing your part of your story. Your passion, your niche focus on infinite banking and helping people create and preserve more wealth. I want to encourage you to keep using the gifts and talents you've been given to be a blessing to others. And I also want to thank our listeners for listening to another episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast. As always, we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the Deferred Sales Trust, or perhaps getting with Anthony Faso or Cameron Christensen to build an infinite wealth insurance plan for you could be the best way to grow your wealth. Please go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com if we could be of any service to you. By the way, remember the Deferred Sales Trust. It works for primary homes. It works for investment real estate. It works for cryptocurrency. Okay. It works for captive insurance. It works for anything that's basically highly appreciated. We can defer your tax. And by the way, you can use it to purchase insurance policies. Would you imagine that? Pretty cool, right? Appreciate you listening to the show, and we hope to connect with you again real soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye.